Hook, Christmas cheer is supposed to bring comfort and peace, but sometimes it arrives carrying something far darker. Merry Christmas, everyone, to mark the season. I'm releasing for brand new merchandise designs so you can bundle up and stay warm through the holidays. There are plenty of other styles available too, making them ideal presents to relax with during this festive time. You can grab shirts, caps, mugs, or hoodies over at shop.spadshhirt.com/letread. The link is down below. Thank you all so much. The year 2008 was brutal. It began reasonably enough, but then Chelsea lost their first ever Champions League final, and not long after that, September's financial collapse had people everywhere worrying about what the future held. Myself included. You probably remember how tense things felt back then. Still, none of that compared to what became deeply personal when a close friend of mine, well called Jane, confessed that her husband of 3 years had been abusing her. We had suspected something was wrong for quite some time. After the honeymoon phase of her marriage to Nick ended, Jane changed completely. Her joy vanished. She was always busy, and she never explained why. At times, it felt as though something was draining the life right out of her, like a parasite feeding quietly. As it turned out, that wasn't far from the truth. Nick was doing exactly that. Metaphorically speaking, he never hit her hard enough to leave visible bruises, but he did strike her. He threatened her, strangled her, and once even locked her inside their attic for an entire day after an argument over his drinking. Nick told Jane she deserved it, that it was for her own benefit, and warned her that if she ever told anyone, he would kill her. No hesitation. He said he'd rather spend the rest of his life behind bars than let her ruin his reputation. I was completely stunned. My mind kept circling one question. How did Nick become this person? When I first met him, he was polite, charming, and showed no red flags whatsoever. Jane later explained that everything changed after Nick's father died. She believed his father had treated Nick's mother the same way when Nick was young. He spiraled into depression afterward, and when he emerged from it, he was never the same man again. Jane told me all this in late spring, and what followed were months of meetings with lawyers and police, mixed with constant fear and desperate hope. Then, in September, Jane finally obtained video evidence of Nick's abuse. The moment she showed it to the police, he was arrested. His trial was scheduled for late November, and with that footage hanging over him, Nick had no option but to plead guilty and pray for mercy. Cliffhanger. But none of us realized then that the real nightmare wasn't over, it was only waiting for the perfect moment to return. Story 1 segment to Hook. Just when justice seemed to have finally spoken, fear found a way to creep back in. Jane was terrified that Nick would only receive a suspended sentence, because she knew a restraining order wouldn't truly protect her from someone like him. She was convinced he'd ignore it without hesitation. But when sentencing day arrived, we were given the best possible outcome. Due to the severe and aggravated nature of his abuse, even though Nick had no prior criminal record, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. For a short while, Jane seemed relieved. She smiled, she slept better, and she even laughed again. But that relief didn't last long. Even though Nick was finally gone, the damage he'd done remained. Jane couldn't stop dwelling on what she called the wasted years of her life. The guilt, the anger, the grief, it all stayed with her. Those of us closest to her could see it clearly. She needed something to lift her spirits, something to remind her that life could still feel normal. So, on the very last day of November, I sent a group message to our mutual friends suggesting we throw Jane a Christmas party. Everyone immediately agreed. We chose Saturday the 13th, and from the first day of December onward, I was in constant preparation mode. I bought mountains of finger foods, stocked the house with nearly a dozen bottles of wine and spirits, and carefully built the perfect party playlist. Once my house was fully dressed in wreaths, garlands, and festive bunting, everything was ready. There was only one rule for the night. No one was allowed to mention Jane's ex-husband. The entire point was to give her space to relax, to breathe, and to forget her troubles, even if only for a few hours. I've always found it strange how Christmas can bring people's deepest anxieties to the surface, especially when family issues are involved. So, if this party could manage to put even the faintest smile on Jane's face, all the effort would be worth it. When guests began arriving, I reminded each one of the rule. I was nervous that alcohol might loosen tongues, but everyone behaved perfectly. Jane arrived to nothing but warmth, smiles, and holiday cheer. No one mentioned Nick, the divorce, or the fact that he was serving the first month of his sentence. The evening began calmly with Prosecco and red wine. But as more friends arrived and spice rum started flowing, the music shifted. Bing Crosby gave way to Mariah Carey, and suddenly the party exploded into life. We were singing, dancing, and laughing loudly enough to shake the house, the kind of noise that only feels acceptable during Christmas, when neighbors are usually too cozy or too drunk to complain. Luckily for us, the neighbors were out for the night, and best of all, Jane was having the time of her life. It was the first time I'd seen her laugh genuinely in years. Not a forced smile, not a mask worn to survive, but real laughter. And still, not a single person mentioned Nick. That is, not until Jane herself asked for everyone's attention. Cliffhanger, and when she finally raised her glass to speak. None of us were prepared for what she was about to say. The room fell silent the moment she lifted her glass, and somehow, the air felt heavier than before. When Jane finally had everyone's attention, I assumed she'd toast to new beginnings or to friendship. Instead, she announced that we were drinking to that bastard sitting behind bars. And just like that, every glass went up. We drank deeply, and the mood shifted again. When I put on Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. Even now, thinking about it makes my chest tighten. Watching someone sing that song and truly mean every word is overwhelming. And Jane absolutely did. The energy lifted even more when I switched to some Rihanna. And by the time Flo Rida's Low blustered through the speakers, the party was in full swing. Spirits were sky high. At some point, I had a mug of mulled wine that someone had warmed on the stove. And then Jane, our friend Steph, and I decided it would be hilarious to put a full face of makeup on Steph's boyfriend at the time. It was the funniest thing imaginable. I laughed so hard I actually peed myself a little. And I wish that were an exaggeration. It isn't, but I can't laugh about it now. Not after what happened next. To get from my bedroom to the bathroom, Jane only needed to cross a few feet of hallway. But that meant passing a large window overlooking the driveway and the street beyond. I noticed she was taking a while in the bathroom, but given how drunk she was, I assumed she might be dealing with an emergency of the tactical variety. So I didn't check on her as quickly as I probably should have. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. By then, it was already too late. Suddenly, Jane burst back into the bedroom, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with terror. She said she needed to leave immediately. I barely had time to process that before she started shouting that he was outside. She kept repeating it. He was standing in the street. He was right there. Steph asked who she was talking about, because in that moment, none of us understood. When Jane finally said Nick's name, our first instinct wasn't fear, it was heartbreak. We assumed she was having some kind of breakdown, PTSD, paranoia, something brought on by alcohol and stress. Steph tried to comfort her, telling her Nick couldn't possibly be outside because he was in prison. But Jane shoved her away and insisted she'd prove it. She grabbed Steph's hand and dragged her into the hallway, pointing up the window toward the streetlight at the end of the driveway. I told her gently that there was no one there. Jane swore that he had been there seconds earlier. Downstairs, no one heard any of this over the music, but Steph's boyfriend and another friend joined us, trying to calm Jane down. Looking back, it sounds insane, but we truly believed she was spiraling into a trauma-induced panic. She'd been drinking heavily and had taken a few other things as well. Being alone in the bathroom likely gave her time to overthink, and once the fear took hold, it snowballed. As Jane's panic attack worsened, Steph said she'd go outside to check, hoping it would settle her nerves. Instead, it made everything worse. Jane begged her not to go, screaming that he'd get her. People heading upstairs to use the bathroom started noticing the commotion. Another friend stayed with Jane while Steph went downstairs. Later, Steph told us that as she walked toward the front door, she wondered why she was even doing it, even if someone was standing outside. It couldn't be Nick. He was locked up. There was no possible way, but she opened the door anyway. Cliffhanger. And in that instant, reality shattered in the most terrifying way imaginable. Steph opened the front door and stepped outside, half expecting the street to be empty and quiet. For a brief moment, it was. The cold night air rushed past her, and the street looked exactly as it always did: parked cars, silent houses, and a single street light humming softly in the distance. Then she saw him. Nick was standing directly beneath the street light at the end of the driveway. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't moving. He was just there, perfectly still, like he had been waiting. The light cast harsh shadows across his face, but there was no mistaking who it was. The man who was supposed to be locked behind bars for the next 5 years was standing free, only a few yards away. This wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a drunken hallucination or a misunderstanding. Nick was real, and when Steph's eyes met his, he smiled. It was a calm, casual smile, the kind you give a neighbor you recognized. That was somehow the worst part. There was no anger on his face, no panic, just confidence, as if he knew exactly how this moment would unfold. Steph froze. Her body refused to move, even as Jane's screams echoed from inside the house. Nick took a single step forward and said Steph's name quietly, almost politely. That was enough to snap her out of it. She turned and ran, slamming the door shut behind her and locking it with shaking hands. Inside, the house erupted into chaos. Everyone was shouting at once, trying to understand what had just happened. Jane collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, repeating that she knew this would happen. Someone grabbed a phone and called the police, barely able to get the words out. Nick didn't leave right away. Through the front window, we could see him standing there, watching the house in complete silence. It felt like hours passed, even though it was only minutes, before distant silence finally broke through the noise of panic inside. Only then did Nick turn round and calmly walk away, disappearing into the darkness between the houses. The police arrived moments later. We told them everything, all at once. When they finally explained what had happened, the truth was almost worse than seeing him outside. Nick had been released earlier that day due to an administrative error, paperwork, a mistake, a system failure. He was never supposed to be free. Jane had been right all along. Prison hadn't protected her, justice hadn't kept him away. And as the Christmas lights continued to blink softly around us, we all understood the same horrifying truth at the exact same time. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just found its way back in.